In this episode, we'll be looking at something that can be both crushing to the soul, but also as uplifting as winning the lottery. Something that without which we'd be totally deluded, and with it, we're truly empowered. Ladies and gentlemen, guys and gals, in this episode, we'll be unravelling the topic of feedback. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, wherever you are, and welcome back to the latest episode of the My Coach Ben podcast. Firstly, I'll apologise for my voice; it's a little bit hoarse. I've been at a trade fair this week and talking non-stop, so hence a little bit of comeuppance, should we say? So apologies for that. Secondly, as always, thanks very much for the continued support, and to the new subscribers, you know who you are. And please do, if you like the content, like, subscribe, and you can follow it in written form on Facebook, Instagram, and on X. And on the topic of feedback, this does beg the question, why feedback? Is it something to buy in, or is it something to actually avoid and just leave the status quo as it is? Well, let's see. The usual procedure, let's start with a definition, and I've got the definition here from the Oxford English Dictionary, which defines feedback as follows. Noun, mass noun. First definition, information about reactions to a product, a person's performance of a task, etc., which is used as a basement for improvement. Throughout this process, we have obtained valuable feedback. Customer feedback suggested that the design flaws were severe. Oh dear. Feedback, as we know, can be a contentious topic, even though it shouldn't be, and particularly in the workplace. To follow are going to be 5 points which we can use to assess feedback and to help us implement a feedback process. So the first one is timeliness. So for optimal effectiveness, feedback has to be delivered immediately following an observed behaviour or performance, in most cases anyway, giving time for immediate consideration by the recipient. So this is important, not to let things drag on and then you hear maybe 3 weeks later that something didn't go as planned. Not ideal. Secondly, specificity. That's a bit of a tricky one. To provide feedback that provides clarity and understanding for all parties involved. So feedback does, of course, have to be specific and tailored to the situation at hand. So vague comments just result in miscommunication, confusion, and in some cases conflict, and that's something we've looked at in a previous episode. Thirdly, we have to compare constructive criticism with praise. So feedback has to have some equilibrium. A balance between constructive criticism and praise that fosters growth and development in employees and colleagues. So it's vital that both areas for improvement, strengths and weaknesses are reviewed and confronted in the feedback process. Generally, I prefer to focus on positives more than negatives. I think we all know when things have gone wrong, and I think we all fundamentally work on a solutions basis or as a way forward. The next point is two-way communication. So effective feedback, of course, requires a dialogue, and that involves active listening and open discourse. So if we engage in constructive dialogue, it creates greater insight and perspectives, and it gives encouragement as well, and leads to collaboration and a better office environment. So a two-way conversation is always important. Last but definitely not least is to follow up. So after giving feedback, it's essential to follow up and just make sure that the recipient has been understood, or if you've received feedback, just to see whether or not any actions or processes, let's say, that you've put in place to improve things or behavioural changes, whether or not they've had any effect. It's always good to check back and to see how things have developed since the feedback process. From the coaching perspective, feedback is something which is relevant not just at work, but also in the personal setting as well, away from work. So I'm going to follow now with 5 questions which can help us see how effective feedback is and what we can do to maybe improve giving or receiving feedback. So the first question will be, what type of feedback have you recently received and how did it make you feel? So maybe you're a little bit upset. Sometimes this could be indication of a truth, or maybe you've been relieved, or the feedback has been in accordance with what your impression has been of a situation. Second, how would you typically respond to feedback? And are there strategies you could employ in order to take full advantage of the usefulness of the feedback? Always something to consider. Can you give an example where you gave feedback to another individual recently and what was the result? Was it positive, negative? Because remember, the more you give feedback, the better you're going to be at it. So practice not only makes perfect, but for sure it does make permanent. Next, another important one, how do you differentiate constructive feedback and criticism? So I think we all know there are times when feedback has been less than helpful, and maybe a point in the right direction wouldn't have gone amiss. And this is something which often can go begging during a feedback exchange. And last but definitely not least, this is relevant in a professional and personal setting, but how can seeking feedback from others contribute to your growth and development? So this is true whether it's in a professional setting, as I say, or in personal life. And in answer to the initial question, feedback is definitely something that we should buy into. Avoiding, in my personal experience, and I'm sure in yours as well, only makes a bad situation worse. And in the right case, it could make a good situation even better. So definitely a buy-in. For the provider of the feedback, it ensures that someone else's actions have been openly acknowledged and the effects thereof have been communicated. So whether they be positive or negative. We all remember a time that we've decided not to bother to provide a feedback, only to find that it would probably have helped a situation, because often people are unaware. So this is one reason where it's always good to let people know where you stand in situations. And conversely, for the receiver of the feedback, this ensures that misgivings and miscommunications can be addressed. And on the other side, of course, that positive actions are cultivated. So we all know that there are times when feedback from a colleague or a loved one has maybe left us less than impressed. Let's put it that way. But actually, on reflection, there's probably some truth, and sometimes it helps us to go that extra mile, let's say. So receiving feedback is also important, of course. So to close, yeah, timely, honest, and constructive feedback is worth its weight in gold, and use it and provide it wherever and whenever possible, because you can't have too much of a good thing. I'm going to wrap it up there, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks very much for stopping by. Remember, if you've liked the content, please like, subscribe, and tell your friends and family. Press the notification bell so you know when the next episode is going to be available. As always, follow the blog on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm trying to get my son to show me how TikTok works, so maybe it will be on that soon as well. You never know. So thanks again, everyone, for the support, and take care of yourselves. And until next time, peace. Your coach, Ben.